By the time Dorian Leigh and her aerodynamic eyebrows landed on her first magazine cover in 1944, she had been a teenage bride and mother, a divorcee at 20, and thwarted as a designer of aircraft parts. So $25 a week for not smiling at a camera was a paying proposition. Leigh, who has died aged 91, soon earned $1 an hour and then made her rare angularity a $300,000 a year enterprise. She and her younger sister, Suzy Parker, were photographer Richard Avedon's favorite faces, before she set up an agency to handle business for photographic models. She funded an independent life, and instead of being kept, as models were assumed to be, paid the bills for men, fashion's equivalent of her cinematic contemporary Ava Gardner. She was born in San Antonio, Texas, the plainest of four Parker sisters, her features too pronounced for the preference for plucked brows and rococo lips that prevailed through the 1930s. She married at college and had 2 children before her divorce in 1937. Her parents took her and the children back into their home in Queens, New York City, and her chemist father encouraged her in education. She studied calculus at New York University and went on an engineer's training program. She worked first as a draftsman for the Navy and then on wings for the Eastern Aircraft Division of General Motors, but quit, she claimed, because her suggested design improvements were rejected. She took a job as an advertising copywriter in New York. In need of extra money, she went to a model agency run by Harry Conover, who recognized her face as suddenly suited to the times. Leigh's age, 27, was problematic, so he instructed her to tell Diana Vreeland, fashion editor at Harper's Bazaar, that she was 19. Vreeland ordered Leigh to leave the eyebrows alone and report back the next day to model a hat for the photographer Louise Dahl Wolfe, leading to her appearance on the cover for June. The movie Cover Girl, a montage of newsstand displays starring Rita Hayworth, was the fashion fantasy of 1944, and Leigh, the Parker was dropped out of courtesy to her family, was the sophisticated edition of Hayworth. Leigh's real career as the zeitgeist began the next year. Charles Refsin had added matching lipsticks to his Revlon nail enamels in 1940, and soon U.S. wartime prosperity, which increased the purchasing power of working women, allowed him to advertise his lips and nails combos in full color. For 1945's Poison Apple campaign, the most tempting color since Eve winked at Adam, Revlon hired Leigh as the face that lost paradise. She became the Revlon Fantasy Dame, starring regularly in its promotions, including the 1952 campaign for Fire and Ice, a Madison Avenue legend. Avedon shot her in faux Balenciaga scarlet cape, and a dress with its front spangled with silver rhinestones. The questions on the spread suggested Leigh's unconventional character. Do you sometimes feel that other women resent you? Do sables excite you, even on other women? A senior advertising executive who hated it said Leigh looked like a little Tootsie whom the Aga Khan spotted on the Riviera. But Vogue thought her classy and ran it big. Leigh had introduced sister Suzy to the Eileen and Jerry Ford agency, and she succeeded Leigh as Revlon goddess. Leigh was candid about her lack of concern for respectability. The lady was a tramp and didn't care who knew it. Linda Scott, in her 1993 study Fresh Lipstick, noted that Leigh had refused millionaires' offers and chosen men whom she considered young, good-looking and broke, prepared to travel with her on assignments and wait for her to finish work. And if I had to pay some bills to make that possible, it was only money, and I happened to have it. Revson's biographer, Andrew Tobias, said Revson attempted to audition Leigh as the next Mrs. Revson in 1950s. He sent her a costly orchid display, and when she said they were the most vulgar thing she had seen, Revson replied, "Well, I didn't want to send you the money." Leigh married and divorced Marshall Hawkins, Roger Mihal, Serge Bordat and Ido Ben Goyon. The Spanish racing driver, Alfonso Cabas de Baca y Leighton, Marquis of Portago, died in a crash in the 1957 Mille Miglia race in Italy, before being granted the divorce that would have legitimized their Mexican marriage. After his loss, she ceased modeling. She had always resented the control photographers had over her, and suggested to Eileen Ford that they establish a Paris-based agency. It was difficult, because French law forbade their fees and the police assumed Leigh to be a procurer, but the enterprise was successful. Leigh was scrupulous about ensuring her models were paid, remembering her own anger at unforthcoming payments. But Ben Goyon, then her husband, was implicated in illegal activities, and the agency was forced to close as their marriage ended in 1964. Leigh had an unmodel-like appetite, loved to cook, and ran a restaurant, Chez Dorian, an hour's drive from Paris. She then returned to the US where she had a catering business, passing on her carbo-rich savoir-faire in books about pancakes, fritters, crullers, and donuts. She published an autobiography, The Girl Who Had Everything, in 1980. So, she played muse to a clutch of photographers, Avedon, Beaton, Blumenfeld, Horst and Penn among them, and in the 1950s became the signature model for Revlon's Fire and Ice lipstick and nail polish campaign in a series of images, photographed by Richard Avedon with the advertising slogan, "For you, who love to flirt with fire, who dare to skate on thin ice." Avedon later stated that she was the most versatile model and the loveliest that he had ever worked with. In his photobiography, 1951, Cecil Beaton observed that Dorian Leigh was able to convey the sweetness of an 18th-century pastel, the allure of a sergeant portrait, or the poignancy of some unfortunate woman who sat for Modigliani, but he also noted that she was as demanding as those who photographed her. In an interview with Vanity Fair in 2006, her fellow supermodel Carmen Della Refis described her as sexy without saying a word. She had so much estrogen, like some men are full of testosterone. The aura of mysterious and intoxicating sensuality which Dorian Leigh conveyed in her photoshoots was enhanced by her reputation as a grand horizontala. Dorian Leigh was undoubtedly one of the first photographic models to merit the prefix super. During the 1940s and 1950s, she was a household name. Dorian Leigh's impact on fashion was profound, helping to establish the standards of beauty and professionalism in modeling that are still in place today.